It all began on a cold October night when Emily first heard it, the faint, rhythmic sound of something breathing. At first, she thought it was the wind rustling through the trees, but the noise was too steady, too deliberate. It seemed to come from within the walls themselves, as if the house were alive. The Johnsons had moved into this old colonial house just 2 weeks ago. It was a dream home, a large, beautiful estate with a grand staircase, vintage furniture, and plenty of space for their growing family. But from the very first night, there was something unsettling about the place. Shadows lingered longer than they should, and the air was thick, heavy, like a silent warning. One night, as Emily lay in bed, she felt it again, the slow, deep inhale and exhale, like the lungs of a sleeping giant. She nudged her husband, Dan, but he just grumbled and turned over, dismissing her concerns. Determined to find the source of the noise, she got up and walked through the dark hallways, listening carefully. The sound led her to the basement, a place she avoided because of its damp, musty smell. Her heart pounded as she slowly opened the door, and the breathing grew louder, deeper, as if whatever was making the noise knew she was coming. She descended the creaking wooden stairs, gripping a flashlight, and shone it around the room. The beam flickered over old boxes, rusty tools, and cobwebs, but nothing seemed out of place. Yet the breathing continued, steady and unnerving. As she turned to leave, her flashlight caught something, a faint, barely visible puff of air escaping from a crack in the wall. It was almost as if the house was sighing. She froze, her breath hitching, and watched as the crack slowly widened, revealing a dark, empty space behind it. She could feel something staring back at her, but she saw nothing. The next morning, Emily tried to tell Dan what she had experienced, but he just laughed it off. "It's an old house, Em. It creaks, it groans. That's normal," he said. But there was nothing normal about it, and Emily knew it. As the days passed, the house seemed to come alive. The walls would groan and shift, as if stretching. Doors that were firmly shut would swing open on their own, and the once faint breathing grew louder, echoing through the rooms. Sometimes, it even felt like the house was whispering, soft, incoherent murmurs that Emily could never quite make out. One evening, while the children were playing in the living room, Emily noticed something strange. The walls seemed to swell, almost imperceptibly, and then contract, as if the house was inhaling and exhaling. She blinked, thinking her eyes were playing tricks on her, but there it was again, expanding, then shrinking back. She grabbed her phone and recorded it, hoping to show Dan proof of what she was seeing. That night, Emily was jolted awake by the loudest breath yet, a deep, rattling sound that echoed through the house. She ran down the hallway, calling for Dan and the kids, but no one responded. Panic set in as she frantically searched the rooms, only to find them empty. Her family had vanished without a trace. With trembling hands, she played back the recording she had made earlier, and her heart dropped. The video showed the living room exactly as she remembered, except for one chilling detail. The walls were slowly closing in, as if they were trying to swallow the room whole. And in the background, she could hear a low, gravelly voice whispering, "They belong to me now." Desperate, Emily ran to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. She banged on the windows, screamed for help, but there was no one around. The house seemed to be breathing faster now, almost excitedly, as if it was feeding off her fear. She could feel the walls closing in, tightening around her, and for a moment she thought she could hear Dan's voice, faint and distant, calling out her name. But it wasn't a cry for help, it was a warning. "Leave," the voice said, echoing through the empty halls, "before it takes you, too." But Emily couldn't leave, because the house had already decided. It wanted her, just like it wanted the rest of her family. As the walls pressed closer, the breathing became more frantic, more ravenous. And then, with a final deafening exhale, everything went silent. The Johnson house was put up for sale a few weeks later, and the real estate agent assured potential buyers that it was just a charming, old property with a bit of history. But those who looked closely would notice the subtle way the walls seemed to pulse, like a heart beating just beneath the surface. And late at night, if they listened carefully, they might even hear the faintest whisper of a breath, as if the house was waiting for someone new to take in, someone new to devour.